Hi, it's Jamie from Guildbrook Farm, and today we are going to render some lard. Not too long ago, I did a video where we were rendering our drippings, and I rendered a bunch of ham drippings and had this nice jar and a half of lard that we got from our drippings. Now it's starting to run low, so we need to render more. Now, you're going to ask me, well, why are you doing a second video on rendering lard? Well, this is not the same as rendering drippings. When you're rendering drippings, this is something where you are cooking meat and then you're taking the juices and the fat from that meat and then you're trying to separate it into fat and into bouillon. So what we are going to do is we are going to render lard that we ordered directly from a pasture-raised pork farm. So let me talk about the different types of fat that you can order when you order from a pig farm and the one that you want. So one type of fat that you can get is pork belly. That's what's used to make bacon. The second type is called leaf fat. Leaf fat is the fat that surrounds the kidney. Now this is the purest kind of fat and the best type for rendering. Leaf fat is the one that you want when you are rendering your own fat. And then the other type of fat can be back fat or any other fat from the pig. Now that kind of fat has a very, very strong flavor. The leaf fat is going to render, generally if you do it correctly, it's going to render very clean and almost odorless. But if you render other types of fat, such as what we did when we got our drippings off of the ham, it's going to have a very strong flavor. This is great for cooking, for adding flavor to, say, greens that you're cooking or anything else that you may be sauteing. But the fat that we are going to render today, the leaf fat, is going to be great for baking, so pastries. You want that nice flaky crust, but you don't want the bacony or ham flavor. So what you want to get, and you can see that I have it here, is pork leaf fat. Again, this is from around the kidney. Now it's really important that you get your pork fat from a pasture-raised pork farm. You don't want to get this from somebody who's injecting antibiotics because your fat is going to have a bunch of chemicals in it and a bunch of antibiotics that you just don't want to ingest. So definitely very important that you get it from a pasture-raised pork farm that treats their animals, that raises their animals naturally. So I have here about a little over 5 pounds, about 5 1/4 pounds of pork fat. This will probably make about a quart of rendered lard when you're done. A quart of rendered lard, if you were to go and buy that at a store, is going to be somewhere in the vicinity of $35, $40. Now I bought this leaf fat for a little bit more than $1 per pound. So there is a huge difference in price when you go to render it yourself. Rendering your own lard is actually super, super simple. The key is going to be in cooking it low and slow. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to chop up this fat into little itty bitty pieces so that it will render down very quickly. I'm just going to cube it up, just like that. And then we're going to put it in our pot. Cutting it up in small cubes just helps it melt faster. We'll do the same to our other one. Hopefully it all fits in the same container. Now we're going to go put this on the stove on low. The key is to put it on low, but first we need to add 1 cup of water. This is just going to keep it from scorching. So now we're going to turn this burner on low. I'm going to put it on 3, and we're going to let this melt down. Okay, now that our fat has started to melt, we're going to start straining this off. Now what I have here is just a pint jar, and I have a funnel in it and a fine mesh strainer on top, and we're going to put a double layer of cheesecloth on top of that. And we're just going to take some of this liquid and we're just going to strain it into the jar. That's about it for that jar. We're just going to let that cool, and we're going to see what we can get out of this for another jar. That's about it for now. We're just going to let this cook down even more and see if we can get more fat out of it as well. Okay, so we have been letting this render down for several hours now. It took about 45 minutes to about an hour for it to start melting and finally get to the point where we can start scooping it off. Once you start getting your liquid, that's when you can start filtering it and putting it into jars like you saw us do. And I put this in the fridge so you could see what it looks like. So you can see what it looks like once it's cool. And this is going to be probably our last batch here. So we are just going to go and get the remaining fat out of here and just filter this in here. So that's about it. That's about all the fat that I'm going to get off of here. I ended up with about 3.5 pints worth of rendered lard off of the 5 pounds of leaf fat that I purchased. I could probably get a little bit more if I cut up the pieces a little bit finer. Some people actually grind it up, but I didn't do that. I just try to do this quick and dirty and get it out and put it in the jars. And what's left in here is called cracklings. Now these are the bits of gristle and fat and stuff that's left over from the melted down fat. Now, a lot of people will then take these and add some salt, fry them up and eat them. They'll put them on top of salads and in sandwiches and stuff. I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I think that's disgusting. I'm not going to eat that. So, yeah, I won't be eating this, and nor will I be feeding it to the chickens. I just, no, not gonna do that. But there are a lot of people that do, and they absolutely love it. And if you wanna try it, that's what you do. You strain it off, you fry it in a pan, add some salt, and there you go. We don't do that. One thing to note here is that if you cook this longer and longer and longer, in particular if you have it on a high temperature, which you don't want to do, it's going to get a stronger and stronger flavor. So probably your first batch that you get off, the liquid that you get off the earliest, is going to have the least amount of flavor and odor. And then as the longer you let it set, the darker it could potentially get and the more like what they call piggy smelling it'll be. So definitely try and get that rendered fat off as quickly as possible and get it filtered into the jars. So what do you use rendered lard for? Well, you use it in place of anything that you use cooking oil for. Rendered lard actually has a higher cooking temperature than, say, something like olive oil, which should technically be used or consumed raw. You shouldn't really heat olive oil up. But lard can be heated up to a higher temperature. So anything like that you can use lard for. Rendered lard in particular is really good for, say, pastries. It leaves a very flaky crust. Now if you start to get into the more piggy flavor, if you have it cooking longer at a higher temperature, you probably don't want to use it, you know, in your pie crust. But for that first rendering, the first couple scoops you get off, if you have like some nice white lard that has no odor, which this one does, then that's the stuff that you want to use in your pastries. So how do you store lard? Well, rendered lard will last about 3 months in the fridge. Obviously, I'm not going to go through this much lard in 3 months, so I take the remainder of it and I put it in the freezer, and it'll keep for 6 months to a year in the freezer. Now, I've read where some people have canned it the way that I can butter. They'll make sure they pour it into sterile jars with sterile lids, put them on, and then the heat as the lard cools, will seal the jar. I read where other people have pressure canned it. And then there's some people that just leave it on their countertop for 6 months or longer, and they say it's perfectly fine. I haven't done any of those things. I don't have any experience with that as far as does that work or not. I can only tell you that other people have done it and it works. For me, I store it in the one that I'm using in the fridge, rest goes in the freezer. So one other thing, some people might ask, why am I using a pot and not a crock pot? Well, the reason for that is because some crock pots can have a very high temperature. Like when you turn it on low, the low temperature is actually too high. And a lot of people will put it in the crock pot and just kind of forget about it. If you do that, it's very possible that it could start to actually cook those little pieces of gristle and fat in there. The cracklings will start to cook in there, and that's what kind of gives it that darker color and also the more piggy flavor. So I would not recommend using a crock pot for rendering lard. I would recommend doing it on the stove top and making sure you keep it on very, very low. But if you choose the crock pot method, let us know how it works. If you guys render your own lard and you guys have any tips or tricks, leave them below. I am by no means an expert in this. This is just what I do. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, leave them below. Love to hear from you guys. And yeah, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.